Good evening, you're watching News Today at 9 p.m. I am Preeti. Choudhry. Our big talking point this evening: Venezuela in his pocket, Trump is eyeing Greenland now. Donro Doctrine, world order upside down, global superpower, cop or backyard bully. And what could be the impact on India? All of that's coming up over the course of the next 45 minutes. All right, let's quickly begin with news break that is coming in. 2 Venezuelan-linked oil tankers has been seized by the U.S. Russian oil tankers also seized by U.S. forces. U.S. has seized Russian oil tanker in the north of Atlantic. U.S. Secretary of War has said sanctioned Venezuelan oil blocked. Russia slams U.S., calls it outright piracy, and also says the situation extremely abnormal, that they are monitoring it. My colleague Pranay Upadhyay, editor India Today Global, joins us live from the newsroom. Pranay, what more can you add?
This seems to be another flashpoint which is coming up between the Russian Federation and the United States government in the Atlantic Sea, because the seizure of a Russian flagged ship is going to be another confrontation between these two powerful states. And what we are learning that the U.S. Navy is strictly deploying their military assets and asserting that they are going to enforce the Venezuelan the oil blockade on the Venezuelan oil imports and exports. And as Secretary Marco Rubio has clearly clarified, and he stated that the U.S. Navy, U.S. military will enforce and ensure that no oil tanker will go in to the Venezuela or will come out of the Venezuelan port. And in that effort, the U.S. military, the U.S. Southern Command has seized, they have captured a ship, a merchant ship, MT Sofia, and another ship, MT Bella 1, which is believed to be a Russian oil tanker in the northern Atlantic around the Iceland. And the Russian government has also acknowledged, Preeti, and now we are waiting for the Russian government's reaction, because meanwhile some of the reaction coming from Moscow clearly indicating that Russia is calling it outright piracy in high seas, because Russia has acknowledged, Russian Foreign Ministry has acknowledged that for from last few days their ship is being tracked by the U.S. ships, U.S. Coast Guard ships. And United States government's argument is that these ships are involved in the export and trading of the illegal Venezuelan oil, and U.S. is only enforcing. There are some the court indictment and court proceedings against these ships, and therefore the U.S. the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Coast Guard has only enforced those orders by the way of seizure of these ships.
Pranay, appreciate you joining us. Dramatic developments that are taking place. We're going to keep a keen eye on those. Russia has called U.S. practical piracy in the high seas, saying their vessel was completely legal. United States says not, but right now that tanker has been seized. We're going to continue to get you more, but let's quickly move on. United States is dramatically reshaping geopolitical fault lines, first with the capture of Venezuelan President Maduro in what the world is now calling an illegitimate military operation, and now with Trump setting his eyes on Greenland, an autonomous Danish territory long seen as off limits. Both these moves have sent shockwaves across the world, promoting fierce diplomatic pushback, and has raised urgent questions about Trump's ambitions and the future of geopolitics.
Days after the U.S. forces captured Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, President Donald Trump has outlined his plan for the Latin American country. In a social media post, Trump declared that the interim government of Venezuela will be turning over 30 to 50 million barrels of high-quality sanctioned oil to the U.S. This, he claimed, will be sold at market price. The money will be controlled by him, and it will be used to benefit the people of the US and Venezuela. Trump is still basking in the success of the military operation. Addressing House Republicans at the Kennedy Center, he recounted how American forces carried out the mission.
It was so complex, 152 airplanes, many, talk about boots on the ground. We had a lot of boots on the ground. But it was amazing. And think of it, nobody was killed. And on the other side, a lot of people were killed. Unfortunately, I say that, soldiers. Cubans, mostly Cubans, but many killed. And they knew we were coming, and they were protected, and our guys weren't. Our guys are jumping out of helicopters and You're not protected, and they were, but it was so brilliant. The electricity for almost the entire country was, boom, turned off. That's when they knew there was a problem. There was no electricity.
Trump is not done yet. The US president has now set his eyes on Greenland.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. A second wave.
US media reports claim Trump has already told his team to prepare a plan to take Greenland, an autonomous territory under Denmark's control. According to media reports, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has told Republican lawmakers Trump plans to buy Greenland. Another Trump aide, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, in an interview claimed nobody is going to fight the US militarily over the future of Greenland. Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has reacted strongly to Trump's administration's plan to take over Greenland, saying a military action will mark the end of NATO.
Firstly, I believe that the American president should be taken seriously when he says that he wants Greenland. But I also want to make it clear that if the United States chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops. That is, including our NATO and thus the security that has been provided since the end of the Second World War.
Leaders from the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain and Denmark issued a joint statement insisting that Greenland belongs to its people and only Denmark and Greenland can decide its future. Meanwhile, India has raised concerns over developments in Venezuela and urged nations to prioritize people's interests.
Yes, we are concerned at the developments, but we would really urge all the parties involved to now sit down and come to a position which is in the interest of the well-being and the safety of the people of Venezuela. Because at the end of the day, that is our concern.
Trump's project to control the Western Hemisphere is being called the Donro Doctrine, a name inspired by Monroe Doctrine of 1823 that aimed at stopping European colonial powers. This time, the objective, according to Trump supporters, is to check Chinese influence in America's backyard. With Geeta Mohan, Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, let's quickly dip into more news break coming in. It seems President Donald Trump has just posted on social media X. Day after European leaders criticized Trump over Greenland, Trump has lashed out at NATO allies. Now, this is a post on the social media X where President Trump says Russia and China have zero fear of NATO without the United States. Doubt NATO would be there for us if we really need them. A long post also says that he ended 8 wars and NATO members foolishly chose not to give me a Nobel Peace Prize. That's a social media post coming in where President Donald Trump is concerned. We're going to get more on that. But the big questions that we are posing this evening, the Donro Doctrine now turning the world order upside down where spheres of influence are concerned. America playing global super cop or a backyard bully. China has called America a bully. You have just a short while ago, Russia saying that the Americans are resorting to be pirates where the high seas are concerned. Who is next on Trump's list? Greenland? What is Trump's message to China? And what does the new order mean for India? Let's take all these questions to our panelists this evening. Ambassador Navtej Sarna, India former ambassador to the US, joins us. Aina Tanjan, Senior Fellow, Center for International Governance, Innovation and Chairman of Asia Narrative's 15th Initiative. Edward Luce, Associate Editor at the FT, US-based writer, columnist. David Goldwyn, CEO, Goldwyn Global Strategies, Chair, Atlantic Council Energy Advisor Group, former State Department for International Affairs of Energy Policy thought leader. Let's quickly get the conversation started, and let's begin with you, Mr. Goldwyn. What seemed like a dystopian fantasy is now seemingly being put together piece by piece where President Trump is concerned. What do you think is next?
Well, I think the the president is flexing worldwide his power. I think a lot of what's going on in Venezuela is really just about showing American force. A lot of what the president is saying about taking over the industry, about running Venezuela, is really not happening. I would put Greenland in the same category. A U.S. president does not have the power to appropriate new territories. That power under Article 4 of our Constitution belongs to the Congress. He's not going to get an appropriation to purchase Greenland. We're not going to have an occupying force in Greenland to try and seize it. And none of what the president seeks there, whether that's we have a military base, whether that's the ability to police the Arctic or the ability to extract resources, requires this. So I think bullying is a provocative term, but I think this is really about showing dominance, pure and simple, not just energy dominance. The president's flexing American power in order to be able to coerce policies and outcomes that he wants. So I think we're seeing some backlash among the MAGA movement to some of this, but right now this is all really, I would say, primarily performative. We can talk a little bit about what's happening in Venezuela, if you like, in terms of the seizure of oil and things like that. But right now, the president has deployed a great deal of military force, and he has removed one individual from Venezuela. But just to focus on Venezuela for a second, we don't have regime change. We have the same people in place. Very little has changed other than the flexing of American muscle. And I think the president likes that, and I think we're likely to see more of it.
All right, we're likely to see more of it. Edward Luce, would you want to weigh in on that? Are we looking at Greenland immediately next after invading Venezuela? What are we really looking at? Marco Rubio in a classified briefing had said that US would want to buy Greenland, and the recent rhetoric does not quite signal an imminent invasion where Greenland is concerned. But you've had President Trump who's saying that he's weighing all options, including the military option.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy the move along, nothing to see here line. I know that's a slightly unfair characterization of Mr. Goldwyn's summary, but he didn't just remove one individual from Venezuela. He removed the head of state. He abducted the head of state.
Mr. Luce, can I, I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, and the reason I'm doing it is because your audio is very, very unclear. We're going to try and correct that and fix it and come right back to you. I want to bring in Ambassador Navtej Sarna meanwhile. Ambassador Sarna, what do you make of the current developments? Because at one end, you'd have, Marco Rubio suggest that this is not, that Greenland would be, in all possibility, bought over. The current rhetoric of an invasion of Greenland is not true, but what's coming in from the President of the United States is very different. He's saying all options are on the table, including the military option.
Well, I think, thank you, Preeti. I think there is a lot of daylight between all the statements that are coming in. And frankly, at the moment, I think you're asking me to predict the unpredictable. President Trump is on a high. He's riding on the basis of the Venezuelan success, in which he didn't bother about the US Congress. And of course, he doesn't bother about the UN. And he's not going to bother about NATO. He's enjoying playing commander-in-chief. He knows there can be no military opposition if he wants to do it, and he'll handle all the problems later. They may not use it ultimately because, frankly, they don't need to use military force. They, the Europeans, the Denmark, the people of Greenland would be, I'm sure, happy to have an adjustment where the security aspects can be taken care of. It's the US which has removed its presence. During the Cold War, they had 10,000 people. Now they have 200 people, and they have one base. If they were to put other bases, they could do so. But I think a lot of this is President Trump playing out in practice the Donro Doctrine. He's showing he's the boss in the Western Hemisphere and he can do anything he wants. And frankly, at the moment, he can do anything he wants.
Ambassador Navtej will also, touch on, because right after he'd taken over, there was a lot of talks that he's a strong believer of spheres of influence, and that's practically playing out right now as we see it. Possibly the Western Hemisphere, where the Americas are concerned, it is for America to take, and we can see that happen, where it seems he's going to leave Russia, to Putin, and Asia to China, which is very worrisome for us back here in India.
Well, certainly if you go into a season of spheres of influence, It's not good, certainly for countries like India and for a lot of other countries. And spheres of influence are not always perfect. There can be disputes there. And of course, it doesn't mean that the power play that the US can do in the Western Hemisphere, I'm not sure that China can actually do it in what becomes its sphere of influence. There'll be far stronger resistance. And frankly, Russia is already trying to do it in Ukraine. And the ones that are really going to suffer at the moment are the Ukrainians and the Europeans, because they don't seem to fall into anybody's sphere of influence and they will have to resist it. So spheres of influence is not the way a modern world can go. We have removed the guardrails. We have removed the system that existed that kept peace, relative global peace, for 75 years. And today you are, whether we like it or not, we are moving into a conflict zone. Let us hope and pray that this doesn't go into global conflict. But what we are seeing today is very disturbing.
Well, and it's far from what usually, would happen in the modern world, Ambassador Navtej, to subjugate your neighbor, to steal its resources. It's actually playing out. Like I said, the dystopian fantasy now being pieced together. If we have Edward Luce back with us, we do have him. All right, we're trying to correct that. But, taking on the conversation where China's reaction is concerned, Aina Tangent, would you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, there's two different parts to the reaction of China. Obviously, they're concerned about what the United States is doing, and I would say that it's being roundly condemned and in no uncertain language. I'm surprised that my colleagues right now refuse to do it. They kind of talk about it as if it's a chess game, but we are in fact facing a real crisis. If the global order breaks down according to the way that Trump does it, it's every country for themselves. The powerful will take and the weak will be taken from. This is the return of the colonial system. So in the short term, China is concerned. They put in over $65 billion in investments into Venezuela, some for oil, some for infrastructure projects, et cetera. So obviously, and they get about 4%, between 2 and 4% of their imported oil from Venezuela. So they can stand this. It's an issue. The question is, what is the U.S. going to do after they've extorted the $2 billion in oil that they say that Venezuela has to give them? It's unknown. But then there's this other part, and that is the long term. Right now, every country in the world, whether they're paying lip service to the United States because they're fearful that they will be targeted next, is in the back rooms definitely looking to see how they can de-risk from the United States. The U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. It has shown itself to be the very authoritarian hegemon that they said everyone should be afraid of. They've accused Russia of this, accused China of it, accuse everybody of it, but they do it themselves. So at this point, China is looking to weigh its options. They're not going to get into a kinetic fight. There is no way that they can sail their navy to South America and start a war, nor do they want to. It wouldn't solve anything. The long-term issue is, will the countries of the rest of the world, like at the climate change conference, suddenly at COP30, suddenly realize that if they want a better world, they're going to have to make it themselves. They can't rely on the former European colonial powers or the American hegemon to do it for them. And if they come together and they go to the United States, it'll be a taco moment. Donald Trump can fight one or two nations, but he cannot fight all of them. And it's unfortunate that so far we haven't had the kind of unity that would be necessary to force him to do his taco move. Trump always chickens out.
Okay, but we haven't even kind of seen the kind of condemnation and criticism that one would have expected coming in from all other countries, including China. Other than calling him a bully, China hasn't really, made a statement which is strong enough. But, cutting across to Mr. Goldwyn. Mr. Goldwyn, circling back to Greenland and with what the kind of commentary we've seen of late, It started off where Venezuela was concerned to take out a dictator. It wasn't about taking out a dictator, it was about oil. Where Greenland is concerned, the talk is about a strategic move. It would be good for America, but it's really not a strategic move as much as it is about minerals.
Well, let me say a couple things. First, you have to appreciate the domestic politics that are going on here. The U.S. economy is performing poorly. The president's polls were below 30%, probably the worst of either of his presidencies. He was mired in this Epstein scandal, where there are accusations that he was really, involved in potentially criminal activity. And this is what Americans kind of call wag the dog. And this is, we have managed to take all of those issues off the headlines, and the president is distracting it with foreign adventurism. This is not the first president to do this, but in terms of domestic politics, that's what's really going on here. Second, I think, as Einar said, and I think Edward Luce, before he came off, was asserting, I mean, this is being significantly condemned, in the United States. This is not popular in the United States, and that's because this is terrible for U.S. interests. I mean, anything that we have wanted to do around the world, whether that is, containing Iranian adventurism or others, have required allies and coalitions for the enforcement of sanctions and for the prosecution of issues, not to mention climate change or transnational crime or anything else. The U.S. is ceding its power. The balance of power has, the way it always works, countries will align against the United States now to contain us, if it engages in this kind of adventurism. And so I think that's been really quite negative. And I think a lot of what the president is doing so far by picking on weaker allies, or not weaker allies, but picking on weaker countries, is he is able to act tough without taking on real action. In terms of spheres of influence, this is about U.S. dominance in the Western Hemisphere, and Cuba is probably next on his list, and if I was Nicaragua, I would worry also. But that does not mean that the president is ceding spheres of influence to Russia or to China. It does not mean that the president is going to give China license on Taiwan, where the semiconductor industry remains very important to U.S. national security interests. And he's all over the place on Russia, clearly not afraid to provoke them by seizing their tanker this morning. But he's really trying to pressure both sides into an unwelcome ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine context. So I would not believe that because the United States is asserting dominance in its own hemisphere, that it is ceding influence or dominance in other hemispheres. This is, the Donro Doctrine is really about, Donald Trump asserting influence where he chooses to assert influence. But his ability to affect real change bears scrutiny. And I think we need to get past the headlines for some realism here, which is, is Donald Trump really running Venezuela? No, we're influencing the sale of some sales of oil on tankers in a way that frankly helps the regime avoid shutting in production. Is he really going to take over Greenland? No, he's not. He's not going to buy it. He's not going to occupy it. And we don't really need it in the first place. So I think, the media tends to latch on to a lot of this bluster and see the president sort of, in a sense, more efficaciousness than he may deserve. So this is about dominating the news. It's about dominating the lines. It's about distracting the American public from what's going on inside the country. And so I think you have to take each of these actions and look very carefully about, can it be accomplished? What is being accomplished? And will it last? Because he's moved on to Greenland because it turns out Venezuela is a lot more complicated than it seems. So he's not going to be running Venezuela. So look over here. Now we're talking about Greenland purely as a distraction.
Ambassador Navteej Sarna, do you concur with Mr. Goldwyn? Because a lot of bluster at times of President Trump he's actually acted on.
Yes, I'm afraid I would nuance that a bit. With all due respect to Mr. Goldwyn, he has made a very good point. But I think I'm less convinced that Mr. Donald Trump is only doing this for the news headlines. Yes, he needs distractions, and going into Greenland would be a great feather in his MAGA cap, because the success of Venezuela has gone down very well with the MAGA crowd. And Greenland, if he goes in without an American soldier being killed, which he can, would be great. At the same time, the Epstein files is a pressure point. The upcoming midterms are a pressure point. The following polls are a pressure point. I absolutely agree. But I think at the moment, he is trying to demonstrate stuff. And it could be Greenland, or it could be Cuba, it could be Colombia. he's asked the president of Colombia, excuse the language, but it's Mr. Trump's language, to watch his ass. So you don't know where it's going to go. And he says Mexico. I mean, and that's all Western Hemisphere. And if he's using the use of force, he is, at least till the midterms, certainly not going to care about the US Congress. So I would be chary of giving him, such a benefit of doubt. I think the world has to prepare for a time where international law, the idea of state sovereignty, the idea of the United Nations or the United Nations Security Council stepping in to keep peace, international peace, is over. We can bring it back, as one of the interlocutors said. We can bring it back if everybody agrees that we can do a world -1. Leave out the United States and strengthen the international organizations again. But for that, we'd all have to agree. And that's going to be extremely difficult. So at the moment, I absolutely agree that it's more or less every country on its own. And the Europeans are trying to gather together. But if push comes to shove, I don't know what Europe will do if President Trump really flexes his muscle over Greenland.
And Mr. Tangent, this could also augur the potential collapse of NATO. And, but for China, that I would reckon, be beneficial.
It would be beneficial in the sense that NATO was an entity that lost its relevance and then started searching for it. When the Soviet Union collapsed, in theory, so should have NATO. Because it didn't, it continued to expand, and that's why we have the situation in Ukraine. Their expansion concerned the security interests of Russia, whether they're right or wrong. This is the way they feel, and NATO knew it. So continuing in along that line was bound to result in exactly what happened, a kinetic conflict which has cost tens of thousands of lives and tens of billions of dollars of damages. So yes, it would be nice if it went away, but the fact is there's still going to be some sort of European pact. Whether the United States is in it or not, Europe feels independently. The question is, will these countries ever come together? Now, I think it is more worrisome. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Goldwyn, that this is a situation where Donald Trump is using these things to distract attention. And I think he will continue to do them as long as it's successful. He has great fear of the Epstein files, the fact that millions of pages of new documents are suddenly showing up, and he's not even able to know exactly how many times his name is mentioned or how many pictures of him are in there or if there are videotapes. So he's concerned. And also about the MAGA is not supporting this Venezuelan thing. You've already had Marjorie Taylor Greene and others come out very publicly and say that this was not what Donald Trump promised. So this idea that MAGA is somewhere behind Trump is nonsense. Right now, it is tearing itself apart. You have the protesters, not protesters, the mob that attacked on January 6th, attacked the building, attacked the Capitol building. They're now marching around, reenacting it and demanding they get hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation because they were exonerated and therefore deserve more money. MAGA is tearing itself apart because it was always a coalition of hate. It's easy to get people to say there's something wrong here. Do you agree with me? Yes. But why it's wrong and what they want to do is some other thing.
But it's also a coalition which worked on the theory of make America great again. And, Trump's foreign policy somewhere down the line harks back to, the times of American imperialism. Ambassador Sarna, you don't quite agree with that, do you?
No,
you were shaking your head.
Because I think, MAGA is ultimately a Trump cult. And as long as Trump is successful, they may have differences, etc. They will, when it comes to the crunch, they will still back him as long as he's successful. I mean, after all, he ran on the plank of no forever wars, no intervention. I mean, what happened to that? But they're still backing him. And that is his base as he goes into the midterms. So unless that begins to break, and I don't think the protests are a sign of MAGA actually breaking. That will break only if Trump comes up to be seen as unsuccessful. So far, he is successful at his level in his own way. He's not successful as a world leader. He's not successful as a visionary or as a statesman. He is successful, frankly, to use the word you started with, as a bully.
Mr. Gondwar, would you want to come in on that? Because with President Trump now, with all the issues that he might have, he's also found maybe a rallying point where MAGA is concerned. Contrary to what maybe Mr. Tangent said, that MAGA is not very happy with what's going on right now.
Well, I think it's true. I think, as Mr. Tangent has said, that MAGA is a bit of a cult, and so they seem to be supportive of the president largely, no matter what he does. But that's they're happy with the looking tough. They're happy with the win. But the president won not just because of MAGA support, which is maybe 28, maybe 30% of the voting electorate. He won because a lot of people in the middle were dissatisfied with the Democratic candidates and because they thought he would be a better manager of the economy. But in a couple of weeks, healthcare subsidies, which are supporting healthcare in a lot of the a lot of the base for the red base for President Trump are going to disappear. His performance on the economy. So his policy is not working for a lot of the people in his base, which is why you're seeing a lot of Republican resignations in the House, why you see his poll numbers so low. So the fact that there is a core of ideological supporters is true, but that will be not sufficient to carry his party through the midterms or into the next term. And there is some dissension, I think, in the ranks, maybe not the pure MAGA base, but a lot of people wondering why he's spending all of this money and all of this attention on other countries rather than on our own country. And just to take Greenland as an example, they may not have thought this through, but when you're a U.S. territory, the way Guam is or other places, you get Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid benefits. You have free immigration into the United States. So I don't know how the MAGA base is going to feel about the U.S. both spending taxpayer money to buy Greenland, if that ever happened. I mean, how many billions of an appropriation, if he could even get it through the Congress, that would cost, but why they're spending money on that rather than on healthcare. And the idea that you're going to be giving them Social Security benefits and healthcare benefits to people in Greenland, when you're not having adequate care for people in the United States. So like everything else with Trump, the headline looks really tough. And when it comes to the implementation and the follow through, this is going to be extremely unpopular, if not, politically impossible, because there's no way you're going to get an appropriation through this Congress, even with a Republican majority, to spend billions of dollars to pay Denmark for Greenland. So again, this is, I think the base is eroding, his popularity is eroding, and this is a distraction. But I think, as both Einar and the ambassador said, it's incredibly destructive, and it will have long-term damaging results for the United States, for our leadership, for our political ability
I would reckon
to form.
for the world right now. But all right, Mr. Goldman, I'm just taking final comments there. And Mr. Tangent, would you want to come in? Because we've taken a view on the domestic politics. But if you look at internationally, we haven't, the actions of Donald Trump have gone down rather tamely. We haven't seen that kind of condemnation coming in, unity of criticism.
Yeah, I mean, it's because no one wants to be the target of his ire. Everyone is giving him airplanes and golden baubles and everything like that, paying him whatever, enriching his children, simply to avoid the confrontation. But this is only 1 year, less than 1 year of Donald Trump. We're living in dog years. Every day he's there, we age 7 days. And how long can they continue to appease a bully? Not sure. But at some point, I think there has to be a rallying point where countries come together and say, enough is enough. We need to act as one. We're not put together an organization. We're not going to put together a new UN. It's doubtful, and I agree with the ambassador that you'd be able to force the U.S. out. But if they come together and simply say, on a trade basis, you can, tax your people and tariff your people as much as you want, but it's going to be uniform, and you're not going to pit us against each other, and you're not allowed to go into other countries and take their things because you think you need them.
Ambassador, Sarna, where we're talking about spheres of influences, and if it is the Western Hemisphere that America has, where Asia is concerned, we're talking about President Trump being a bully, subjugating your neighbor, stealing their minerals, and nobody's really saying anything. He's been allowed to do so with very less criticism. We should be worried. We have a bully across our border where China is concerned.
Well, I think that situation exists no matter what Mr. Trump does. What has happened is that, the indications so far are that the strategic convergence that India and the United States had over their approach to China, which was frankly, a source of great comfort for us, is no longer reliable. And, if Mr. Trump either, say, does a sort of big G2 deal with China in different things, or if he says, I don't care what China does in their sphere, then we are absolutely without that strategic convergence. Then everything that we've discussed in the last 20 years, or at least certainly the last 10 years about the
Do you think that's possible, at the cost of coming in, Ambassador Sarna, do you think that's possible, that there is an understanding that Russia can go into Ukraine, allow me to do what I'm doing, and China can continue its dominance in Asia?
Well,
we all have our spheres of influence.
That would be the theory of spheres of influence, but I think it's a theory. There are a lot of other countries who would resist that. Now, particularly in Asia, you have Japan, you have Korea, you have India, you have the entire ASEAN. I mean, they're not just going to all roll over. Russia's sphere of influence, as Russia would like to influence all of Europe. I mean, Germany is rearming. Poland has increased its defense allocation to 4.7% of GDP. A number of East European countries are now rearming and they want to increase their defense production. So these countries are not going to roll over. And I don't think all the countries of Latin America, I mean, you have countries like Brazil, etc., who are also not going to be taking this quietly. They have come out very strongly. Okay. So it's a good theory, in theory, but it won't work in practice. What will work in practice in such a multi-plural, let us say a plural world, I can't even call it a multipolar world, in a plural world will be the kind of system that we had in place. A certain set of rules, certain rules for the road, certain respect for treaties, respect for international law. I know this is sounding extremely old-fashioned in today's atmosphere, but it needs to be said, because if we stop saying it, it will stop existing.
All right, Ambassador Sarna, I want to, Mr. Goldwyn, just a final word there. The look ahead, do you think it's going to be all rhetoric, or do you see there's going to be intent where there's talk of Greenland? You started off that it's more bluster, but what do you see happening in the next couple of weeks?
Donald Trump is a transactional president, and so he's looking for a deal and for a quick win, and then he moves on to the next subject. We went from all of the trade deals, which were really deals on paper, but he's got to deal with Europe. He's got to deal with a bunch of countries. Has anything actually changed? Have investment really shifted? No, not really. And I think that's what we're looking at in Venezuela. That's what we're looking at with Greenland. I think we're looking for the president pushing as hard as he can, seeing what he can get away with, accepting a transaction or a deal that makes it look like he's won something, and then on to the next thing. So I don't think he's taking over Greenland. I don't think he's ceding Taiwan to China. I don't think he's going to cede Ukraine to Russia. All these would, in the end, be hugely politically unpopular and costly to him. But he's looking for quick wins. He's picking up a couple of them, and this is his MO, and I think we're going to see this for years to come. But I think, as both my colleagues have pointed out, this is all happening at extreme damage to world security, to the rule of law, to the U.S. ability to form coalitions in the future, which will take some generations to undo. But I think, whether you call it taco or you call it transactional, I think the president will push as far as he can, and he will take a quick win, even a performative, symbolic win, and then move on to the next issue, which is why he's taken out Maduro, but the regime is still there. I think we're going to see more of the same.
All right, so he's going to move on, but something that he hasn't quite moved on from is he's still hung up on not getting the Nobel. I'm just reading out his latest tweet, where he's actually calling NATO foolish for not giving him a Nobel because he ended 8 wars. We're going to just leave it at that because we don't quite know what tomorrow brings. But thank you, gentlemen, all three of you, for taking the time out and joining us this evening. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, with that, let's quickly shift focus to Delhi, where an anti-encroachment drive ordered by the Delhi High Court spiraled into abject chaos at the Turkman Gate after rumors sparked panic and provocation. What really happened on ground and who turned a legal action into a flashpoint? Here's the full detail.
At midnight, Turkman Gate in Delhi turned into a flashpoint. 32 bulldozers, 4 excavators. Anti-encroachment drive near the Faiz-e-Ilahi mosque turned violent. The trigger, rumors and messages alleging that the mosque itself was being demolished. The operation was planned in coordination meeting with the Aman committee and local stakeholder and was aimed only at encroachments. A banquet hall, shops, an illegally built dispensary, all near the Faiz-e-Ilahi mosque, on the orders of the Delhi High Court.
Guys, आप देख सकते हैं ये दरगाह फैज़-ए-इलाही का क्या हाल है?
But as rumors of mosque demolition spread, a crowd gathered. Stone pelting began, and the police responded with tear gas. 2 policemen were injured in the line of duty.
मेरे हिसाब से 2000 या से एस्टिमेट होगा। एक गेट है उसको बंद करने के लिए सर गए, सर के साथ में मैं भी गया था। फिर सर को भी पत्थर लगा, फिर आगे पीछे जाते वक्त मुझे भी पत्थर लग गया।
बैरिकेड लगे हुए थे, जगह जगह बैरिकेड लगा रखे थे पब्लिक को रोकने के लिए कि भाई ऐसा कुछ ना है, जो कोर्ट के ऑर्डर हैं उसके हिसाब से काम होगा। अचानक गलियों से पत्थर आने लग गए, पत्थरबाजी होने लग गई रोड से सामने से।
Now videos have surfaced exposing what police call a deliberate attempt to give a legal action a religious color.
भाई मस्जिद को तोड़ रहे हैं लोग, मस्जिद को। मुसलमानों जाग जाओ, अभी वक्त है। ये देखो।
अब मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ यहाँ पर बिल्डोजर। ये सामने आप देख रहे होंगे बिल्डोजर। मैं दिखाता हूँ कितने बिल्डोजर आए। मेरे भाइयों, घर पे बैठने से कुछ नहीं होगा। घर से निकलो, दरगाह फैज़-ए-इलाही के बाहर आओ, पूरी रात काली करो, मस्जिद को कुछ होने नहीं देना है, जल्दी से।
Police say these videos were circulated to trigger violence. 5 are arrested, many others detained. Police say the conspiracy is being uncovered layer by layer.
इस मामले में 5 लोगों को ऑलरेडी गिरफ्तार किया जा चुका है और बाकियों की भी इमेजेस हैं तो उनके ऊपर भी कार्रवाई करेंगे।
We had deployed drone cameras. We have CCTV cameras. We had used body-worn cameras also. In fact, one of the police officers who were injured, he was wearing a body-worn camera. So we are analyzing that CCTV footage. Based on that, we'll be able to identify. In fact, some of them have been already detained, and we are questioning them.
A video of SP-MP Mohibullah Nadwi at the Turkman Gate arguing with the police has also surfaced. On Tuesday morning, the true picture of demolition emerged. The mosque stands untouched. Only illegal structures raised.
This is the diagnostic center brought down. The genset can be seen very clearly. Possibly the owners thought that nothing would happen to their structure despite the many of the warnings. Mosque stands untouched. This is the structure which is right next to the mosque, which has been taken down, and where the authorities possibly thought it might damage the mosque, the bulldozers were stopped.
MIM MP Asaduddin Owaisi, however, questioned the BJP and police.
ये तो गलत है बिल्कुल। अरे पूरा लिखा हुआ है इसमें, इसका रिकॉर्ड है, वक्फ फंड दिया जा रहा है। इस फैसले के खिलाफ फौरन SLP डालकर स्टेटस को लेने की बहुत जरूरत है, मगर वक्फ की जायदाद का नुकसान हुआ इसमें।
तमाम उन अवैध निर्माणों के खिलाफ मांग करेगा, कार्रवाई करेगा, तो क्या आप वहीं पे बुलडोजर भेजेंगे? ये सवाल मेरा है दिल्ली के मुख्यमंत्री से भी और भारतीय जनता पार्टी से भी।
What began as an anti-encroachment drive turned violent after rumors. the police have assured action against the encroachers and those who sparked the chaos. With Arvind Ojha and Amit Bharadwaj, Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, let's move on to a story which has, or rather two judgments that have sparked a debate. Two Supreme Court benches, two very different laws and two sharply contrasting readings of liberty. Article 21. As bail rulings under UAPA and PMLA pull in opposite directions, questions are now being raised about consistency, interpretation and the meaning of Article 21. Two different benches, one Supreme Court delivering starkly different judgments, underscoring the inherent subjectivity of constitutional interpretation, exposing how judicial outcomes often hinge less on settled law, more on interpretive choice. The same statute, the same constitution, but two parallel universes of liberty. The law, in effect, changes with the bench. The latest spark has ignited a larger debate on criminal justice and the interpretation of personal liberty and of Article 21. Article 21 that guarantees the fundamental right to protection of life and personal liberty. Case in example, 5th January 2026, the two-judge bench of Arvind Kumar and N.V. Anjaria of the Supreme Court denied bail to activists Umar, Khalid and Sharjeel Imam in the Delhi riots conspiracy case, both charged under UAPA. The bench held the nature and gravity of the offence linked to national security outweighed concerns over delay in trial, underlining that in serious cases, prolonged incarceration alone is not sufficient ground for bail. The selective reading of liberty in UAPA sparked a wider question. Should liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution be subject to interpretation, or should it remain an unqualified guarantee? Just one day later, 6 January 2026, another bench, another judgment. Hearing a case under PMLA, the Supreme Court bench struck a very different chord, granting bail to the Amtech Group promoter Arvind Dham after 16 months in jail. A bench of Justice Sanjay Kumar and Alok Arandhe ruled that the accused has a fundamental right to a speedy trial and it is not eclipsed by the nature of the offence. The bench went further, saying if the state cannot ensure a timely trial, it cannot oppose bail. The bench said, and I quote, "It is well settled that if the state or any prosecuting agency, including the court, has no wherewithal to provide or protect the fundamental rights of an accused to have a speedy trial, the state or court should not oppose the plea for bail on the grounds that the crime committed is serious." So while Umar, Khalid and Sharjeel Imam, who have spent nearly 6 years in custody, are being prosecuted for terror under UAPA and not PMLA, yet the bail thresholds under UAPA Section 43D and PMLA Section 45 are exactly the same. Where one bench granting bail to former Amtech Group chairperson is in complete contradiction to the judgment passed by another bench, while rejecting the bail plea of Umar and Sharjeel. Two rulings, one constitutional principle and contrasting outcomes. The question tonight is whether India's highest court is sending mixed signals or reaffirming that liberty and security are weighed on very different scales. Today, the Supreme Court stands at a crossroad in its engagement with liberty. Its jurisprudence under UAPA and PMLA reflect contradictions. The larger tragedy is not that bail is denied, but that the reason for denial are inconsistent. All right, right, let's talk some politics. The BMC polls, civic polls in Maharashtra are going to take place shortly. Ideology is clearly taking a backseat as unlikely alliances redraw the political map. From Ambernath to Akot, rivals are teaming up purely for power. Why I say ideology has taken a backseat? Well, you have the BJP tying up with the AIMIM. You have the Congress tying up with the BJP to defeat who? Shiv Sena. Does it quite add up politically? No, but it's about power, not so much about ideology.
In Maharashtra's municipal elections, ideology is clearly taking a backseat. What's driving outcomes instead is pure power arithmetic. Old rivals are turning partners, not for shared principles, but for the numbers that secure power. The most striking example is from Ambernath Municipal Council, where Eknath Shinde's Shiv Sena emerged as the largest party but fell short of majority by 4 seats. Here, bitter national rivals, the BJP and the Congress, joined hands with Ajit Pawar's NCP to keep the Shiv Sena out. The Congress leadership, embarrassed by the events in Ambernath, suspended its 12 corporators who struck a deal with the BJP.
इसको जो रंग देने की कोशिश हो रही है कि भाजपा और कांग्रेस एक साथ आ रही है, पूरी तरह से गलत है। ना वहाँ चुनाव चिन्ह है, ना वहाँ कोई अलायंस फॉर्मली बात हुई है। वो लोकल लेवल पर एक नगर पालिका के ऊपर एक लोगों ने कोशिश की है, उनके कुछ अलग कॉज होंगे, लेकिन बावजूद इसके हम उनको नोटिस भी दे रहे हैं क्योंकि ये कांग्रेस पार्टी को मंजूर नहीं है।
The reaction from the Shinde Sena was swift and sharp.
जो गठबंधन यहाँ पर हुआ है उसके बारे में अगर आप भारतीय जनता पार्टी के वरिष्ठ नेताओं को अगर पूछोगे तो वो अच्छे से आपको जवाब दे पाएंगे कि उन्होंने कांग्रेस के साथ जो है अलायंस क्यों किया।
Ambernath is not an isolated case. In Akot municipality in Akola district, the BJP has stitched up an alliance with members of the MIM, a move that has triggered fresh questions about the party's ideological positioning, particularly its Hindutva plank.
मला आश्चर्य भारतीय जनता पक्षाचं वाटतं. त्यांना काँग्रेस मुक्त भारत करायचं होतं मोदींना. महाराष्ट्रात चित्र वेगळं आहे. एक तर अर्धी काँग्रेस त्याने भाजपात सामील करून घेतलेली आहे आणि उरलेल्या ठिकाणी ते युती करतायत त्यांच्या बरोबर सरळ एमआयएम बरोबर. बघा एमआयएम बरोबर सुद्धा भाजपनं कधी युती केली आहे का मुंबईच्या बाहेर महाराष्ट्राच्या बाहेर मला माहित नाही, पण महाराष्ट्रामध्ये नवा पॅटर्न आहे. भाजपला कोणीही चालतो.
These local tie-ups have not gone down well with the BJP's leadership. Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis has conveyed strong displeasure and directed the party's local units to end alliances with the Congress in Ambernath and the MIM in Akot. Across Maharashtra, unlikely alliances are reshaping local politics. A reminder that when it comes to municipal power, electoral arithmetic often trumps ideology. Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, on that not so ideological note, it's a wrap on News Today. We're going to see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Have a good night ahead.